The wind scraped low across the dry grass, rasping like bones in a box. Morning came mean and bitter to Calder Boone's ranch, painting the hills in long shadows that refused to die. The sun hadn't risen more than a hand above the horizon when Boone swung his leg over his saddle, Winchester strapped to the worn leather at his back, and rode toward the far fence line. Coyotes had been yipping all night, closer than they should have been. He figured something was dead, or something needed killing. Boone wasn't much for town these days, not since his wife went under the earth. Trebone Gulch was full of whispers and wide eyes that didn't look you in the face, and he liked his company dead quiet. He talked more to horses than men. They didn't lie. They didn't ask questions he didn't want to answer. The east pasture hadn't been ridden in months. Fence slats leaned like drunks, and the gate near the gulch had half its hinge rusted clean through. He dismounted and inspected the prints near the boundary, brows drawing tight. Boot tracks. Small light. Too new. Something about the stillness was off. Even the birds were holding their breath. That's when he heard it. Faint, far off, but sharp enough to prickle the skin behind his ears. A sound not made by any creature of the field. It was a whimper, ragged and human. His hand went straight to the rifle. He listened again. The sound came again, carried on a gust. Low, pained, terrified. He moved faster now. No need for spurs. His boots hit the dirt and carried him toward the old family graveyard tucked behind a broken line of cottonwoods. It was land too rocky to plow, where a few Boone kin had been put in the ground long before Calder had ever seen war. The place hadn't been visited in years. But now, standing crooked among the weathered markers, was a shape. At first glance he thought it was a child, kneeling or collapsed against a headstone. He blinked. No, there were chains. Rusty iron looped tight around her ankle, the other end bolted directly into the stone itself. He took one step forward. The girl's eyes snapped open. She didn't scream. She just stared. Face hollowed by dust and sun, lips cracked, hair wild and sticking to her cheeks like spiderwebs. She looked like something between dead and dreaming. Her dress was faded black, formal, torn, almost funereal in cut. Her arms trembled, whether from weakness or fear he couldn't tell. Boone knelt slowly, hands held open, empty. "Easy now," he said. His voice was raw with disuse. "Ain't here to hurt you." She flinched when he got close. Her wrists had marks, some fresh, some old. The chain had bitten deep into her leg. She had clearly tried to wrench free, to no use. The lock was thick, old-world iron. No key in sight. "Name's Boone." "Calder Boone," he offered, watching her carefully. "You got a name, girl?" She blinked at him, slow. Then, in a whisper so faint it nearly got lost in the wind, "Eliza." He stood and looked at the headstone, wiping the dirt away with his glove. The breath hitched in his throat. Eliza May Harrow. Beloved daughter. Died 1875. It was the current year. He looked down again at the girl. "You ain't dead," he muttered, more to himself than her. She gave no answer. It took time to work the bolt free with a crowbar from his saddlebag. The rust made it stubborn, and each pull of the chain caused Eliza to twitch in pain. He muttered apologies and kept working until finally, with a cracking groan, the iron gave way. She didn't move when it fell from her leg. Just stared at him with those sunburnt eyes. He offered her his canteen. She took it but didn't drink right away. Instead, she watched him, then brought it to her lips only after he took a swig himself. "Trust didn't come easy out here." "Who did this to you?" he asked. She shook her head. "Don't know." "You lying?" Another shake. "Don't remember." Boone didn't believe her, not entirely. But the tremor in her hand said she believed what she was saying. He put her on his horse, slow and careful. She didn't protest. Just held on weakly, head against the saddle horn. He walked alongside as the sun climbed higher, already pulling sweat from under his hat. Back at the ranch, she hesitated at the gate. Boone noted it, said nothing. When they reached the house, she hesitated again at the threshold. He opened the door, stepped in first, turned back. "You ain't a ghost girl," he said. "No one's keeping you outside." She stepped over the threshold like it burned. He gave her the cot in the corner, brought broth and bread. She ate like she hadn't in days, barely tasting. Boone watched her in silence, weighing her thin frame, sunken cheeks, how her eyes darted to every window like she expected something to crawl through. "Been out there long?" he asked. "I don't know," she said again. It was cold, then hot. Then cold again. "So at least a season, maybe two." "Family?" She looked at him like the word was foreign. He tried a different tack. "That grave. It had your name." She swallowed hard. "They said I died. Said I was supposed to. That's what the preacher told me." Boone stiffened. What preacher? She didn't answer. That night, after she'd gone quiet on the cot, Boone sat outside, pipe forgotten in his hand. Stars wheeled slow above, indifferent. He remembered the war, the noise and smoke, and boys turned into meat. He remembered burying his wife after the fever took her. But he'd never felt the kind of unease that clung to his skin now. There was something wrong about that grave. Something worse than death. Next morning she was already awake, sitting bolt upright, watching him through the window. "Why do you live alone?" she asked. He looked up from the kindling. "Because everyone else left." That was all he said. They settled into a rhythm over the next day. She helped feed the hens, water the horses. She moved like she'd done chores before, but always kept one eye on the road. Every crow made her flinch. Every gust of wind pulled her gaze skyward. Boone noticed something else. She never slept deeply. One night, he heard her cry out, just once, and woke to find her standing outside in her shift, staring at the graveyard on the ridge. He brought her inside. She didn't remember leaving the house. That morning he rode to town. Left her behind with his dog, Bramble. Took longer than usual. Got sidelong glances and questions he didn't answer. Bought supplies. Kept his ears open. No one had reported a missing girl. No one knew an Eliza Harrow. He picked up an old county ledger at the post office, dusty and thin. The name Harrow appeared only once. A family outside of town, burned out in a fire 2 years back. No survivors. No graves either. Just ash and rumor. When he rode back, the front gate was open. He drew his rifle. Bramble was barking. Not angry. Afraid. Eliza stood in the middle of the yard, barefoot, shaking, her hands covered in dirt. What happened? She looked down at her hands, eyes wide. I was digging. In my sleep. I was trying to go back. I don't remember why. Boone didn't like the way her voice changed when she said it. Like someone else was speaking through her. He cleaned her up, didn't ask more questions. That night he nailed the windows shut. Not to keep her in, but something else out. Before bed she asked him something strange. If someone's buried before they die, does that mean their soul can't leave? He didn't answer. He didn't sleep much either. 3 days later, while checking the traps near the creek, Boone found tracks. Horses. Not his. Recent. 3 riders. Heavy. Armed. They hadn't come to hunt game. They'd stopped at the graveyard. He followed the trail back, heart like a drum in his chest. The headstone had been disturbed. Not broken. Moved. He went inside, took down the rifle from above the mantel and checked the rounds. That night he gave Eliza a pistol. It shook in her hands. "I don't know how," she whispered. "You'll learn," he said. Fast. The wind picked up again, same as the morning he found her. The storm was coming. But not the kind that brought rain. And he was beginning to believe that this girl had clawed her way not out of the earth, but out of hell. Still he wouldn't turn her away. Because no one else had stood between her and the grave. Now it was his turn. And if something wanted her back, it'd have to kill him first. The storm broke before sunrise. Lightning flashed across the horizon, silhouetting the ridge and its crooked trees. Thunder rolled low, not close enough to strike, but loud enough to make the windows shudder in their frames. Calder Boone sat in his rocking chair, rifle across his lap, boots unmoving on the floorboards. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows behind the girl sitting on the cot, her knees hugged to her chest, eyes staring at nothing. Eliza hadn't spoken since the tracks were found. The pistol he'd given her sat and used beside her pillow as if it were cursed. Boone hadn't pressed her. Not yet. Questions were tools and you used them sparingly out here. Too many, too fast, and you scared the truth back into hiding. "You remember anything else?" he asked finally, voice low and flat. She blinked once, slowly, then looked up. "Dreams? What kind?" "The kind that don't feel like dreams." Her voice was rough. "I hear music. A hymn, I think. Someone's holding my hand. There's dirt in my mouth." Boone didn't move. "Sounds like memory to me. I don't want it to be." She stood and moved to the window, watching the night. "Do you think evil's real?" she asked, not looking back at him. Boone was quiet for a moment. "I've seen men set fire to churches with people still praying inside. Seen others laugh while they did it. If that ain't evil, I don't know what is." Eliza didn't say anything. She hadn't asked about the headstone again. Boone figured she was still trying to build walls around the thought of it. He couldn't blame her. You don't just walk away from seeing your name carved in stone like that and feel whole. He shifted forward. "That preacher you mentioned. You said he told you you were supposed to die." She nodded faintly. "You know his name?" Pause. Then, "Malachi." The name hit Boone like a cold slap. He stood, slow, deliberate, and walked over to the fireplace. There, from behind the stones, he pulled out a faded photograph. A younger man stood beside him in uniform, both of them unsmiling, hardened. The other man's face was sharper, eyes colder. Same jaw, same chin. Same blood. Malachi Boone, Calder said. My brother. Eliza turned to him fully, disbelief crossing her face. He left after the war, Calder continued. Said he found God out in Missouri. Said the war taught him that fire cleanses. I didn't like what that meant. Never heard from him again. Eliza sank into the chair opposite him. He said we were sinners. All of us. Said the grave was a gate, and if we went through it willingly, we'd come out pure. Boone's hands clenched around the rifle. There were others, she added. Girls. Younger than me. Some boys too. I remember candles and dirt and voices chanting. But I don't remember how I got there. Boone's gut twisted. He's still out there. And now he knows you're not dead. Eliza swallowed hard. He called me his lamb. His firstborn. Said my blood would bring the rest through. A silence fell, thick as tar. Then from outside the dog barked. Once. Twice. Then silence. Boone moved to the door, rifle up. He opened it slow, peering into the night. Nothing. He stepped out onto the porch, the wood creaking under his boots. The air was heavy with rain and something else. Something foul like old sweat and rot. He took one step down and saw the scratch marks on the fence post. Symbols. Carved deep. He raised the lantern, tracing one with his thumb. A circle with a cross through it. The mark of the blood creed. Eliza, he called. Get inside the root cellar. Now. She was already at the door, eyes wide. What is it? They've been here. She hesitated. Now. She moved fast, disappearing beneath the trapdoor in the floor. He closed it behind her and dragged the heavy armoire over the top. Not perfect, but enough to buy time. He didn't sleep that night. By morning, no sign of intruders remained. Just the symbols mocking him like open wounds on the wood. The dog returned, unharmed but skittish. Boone let Eliza out, and she emerged like a ghost from the dark, face pale, jaw tight. We can't stay, she said simply. Boone nodded. No, we can't. They packed what they could, food, water, ammunition. Boone gave her one of his wife's old coats, patched but warm. She buttoned it up like armor, her eyes distant. They rode out before noon, Boone in the lead, Eliza behind on the old mule. She didn't complain. Didn't ask where they were going. Boone led them to the old chapel west of the ridge, a half-burned ruin forgotten by most. It was stone, strong, with a root cellar of its own. He figured it was as good a place as any to hole up and plan. Inside, the air smelled of ash and damp wood. Dust danced in the shafts of light spilling through the broken roof. Eliza wandered to the altar, fingers brushing the cracked wood. I know this place, she murmured. You been here? She shook her head. I don't think so. But it feels wrong. Familiar. Boone looked around. He hadn't been inside since his wife's funeral. He tried not to come near it. Too many memories tied up in the soot. He laid out the supplies, checked the rifle. Then he looked over at her and asked, You ever fire one of these? She hesitated. I held one once. They said I wasn't allowed. Learn now. He showed her the basics, loading, cocking, sighting. Her hands were unsteady, but her eyes focused. She didn't flinch at the recoil, only frowned, adjusted her grip. That's it, he said. Again. She fired again. By the 10th round, she was hitting near the center of the target he'd carved into a stump. You're a fast learner. I don't want to be, she said. I just don't want to be caught again. That night, as they sat beside a small fire, Boone reached into his coat and pulled out an old envelope. He handed it to her. What's this? A letter. From Malachi. From 10 years ago. I never read it. Figured it was better left unopened. She looked at it, then back at him. Why now? Because you need to see what kind of man he became. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The writing was sharp, controlled, deliberate. Brother, I have seen the face of judgment, and it is glorious. You will say I'm mad. You always did fear fire. But fire doesn't lie. It cleanses. And soon I will be clean. It went on in that same fevered tone, describing visions, rituals, sacrifices. He spoke of blood as a door, of children as vessels. Eliza stopped halfway through. He's insane. Boone nodded. He always was. Just took him longer to show it. She folded the letter and handed it back. So what now? We find out where he's hiding. Then we put an end to it. Eliza's face hardened. You think we can? If we don't, no one else will. Lightning flickered again outside. In the glow, Boone saw something he hadn't before, on the back wall of the chapel, half hidden by shadow and rot. A mural. Faded but clear enough. A circle. A cross. And 7 figures standing in a ring, arms outstretched. One of them held a child upside down, feet bound. Eliza stepped closer. That's it. That's the place. Boone turned to her. Where? There was a mine. Near the Harrow place. Collapsed years ago. They called it the Devil's Lung. Boone nodded. Then that's where we ride. The fire cracked low. Outside, the wind had stilled, but the quiet didn't bring peace. It brought certainty. They weren't running anymore. They were hunting. The journey to the Devil's Lung began before dawn, the sky still heavy with the night's damp breath. Calder Boone led the way in silence, eyes fixed on the craggy hills that loomed ahead like broken teeth. Behind him, Eliza rode with her shoulders tight and her face set, the borrowed coat pulled up high against the chill. She hadn't asked for rest, not even once. Boone respected that. Fear had turned into purpose, and purpose had its own kind of fuel. The path was narrow and cruel, winding along a dry ravine that once held water, now littered with bones and brambles. Coyotes watched them from afar, eyes catching the morning light like coins in the dirt. Neither rider paid them mind. There were worse things than coyotes in the dark, and both of them had seen it. By midday the wind picked up, carrying with it a foul scent. Earth turned sour. Boone slowed his horse and raised his hand. Smell that? Eliza nodded. Something's wrong with the ground. Boone dismounted and crouched near a patch of scorched grass. He ran his fingers through the soil, brought them to his nose. Sulfur. Like fire? Like rot and fire mixed. They moved on, slower now, senses straining. The trees grew sparser, the sun crueler. At last they reached a high ridge, and Boone motioned Eliza to dismount. He led her to the edge and pointed down. There, nestled between cliffs, lay the remnants of an old mining camp. Shacks collapsed under years of wind and weather, wagons splintered and upturned. And at the far edge, black and gaping like a wound, was the mine entrance. A crude sign half swallowed by ivy read, "The Lung." Eliza's breath caught. That's it, she said. I remember the smell. The hymns. They used to lead us in at night. Boone squinted. You see that? He pointed at a faint figure near the entrance, hooded and unmoving. Guard. Eliza's jaw tensed. They're still using it. Boone pulled out his scope and studied the entrance. There's movement. 2 more just inside. Could be more below. She reached for the rifle strapped to her back. So we go in. Not yet. He crouched and drew a rough sketch in the dirt, marking the slope, the trees, the approach. We wait till dark. Move in quiet. See how deep this thing goes before we start shooting. Eliza nodded. If they see me? They won't. Not if we're careful. Boone. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shone. If I don't come out. You will. But if I don't, you finish it. Burn it. Every last one of them. Boone met her gaze. You have my word. That night, under a new moon, they moved like ghosts. The descent took half an hour, each step careful, boots quiet on the loose shale. Boone led, rifle in hand, senses sharp. The air grew colder as they neared the lung, the stench of blood and old smoke growing thicker. From within, the faint sound of chanting echoed, a rhythmic hum that made Boone's spine itch. They reached the edge of the mine entrance and crouched behind a rusted ore cart. A single lantern burned near the guard, casting flickers of gold across the stone. The man's back was turned. Boone whispered, "Stay here." Before Eliza could answer, he slipped into the dark. Silent. Precise. He was behind the man in seconds, arm around the neck, blade in quick, deep, final. The guard fell without a sound. Boone waved Eliza forward. They passed into the tunnel, the walls damp and slick. The chanting grew louder, clearer. It wasn't English, it was older, guttural, a language that didn't belong in any church Boone had ever known. They followed it down, twisting deeper into the earth. The path forked twice, but Boone stayed left, always left, trusting Eliza's flickers of memory. Finally, the passage opened into a wide chamber, lit by a ring of torches. Boone pulled her back into the shadows, crouched low. There were more than a dozen figures in robes, all kneeling. At the center of the circle, bound and gagged, was a girl, no more than 12. Her eyes were wide with terror, her face streaked with blood. Behind her, arms raised in mad exultation, stood Malachi Boone. Boone's breath caught. The years hadn't dulled the man, if anything they'd sharpened him. His beard was white now, but his eyes were fever-bright, his voice thick with zeal. "Eliza," Boone whispered. She stared at the man, a tremble in her jaw. "That's him." Malachi raised his arms higher. "The lamb was taken. But the lamb has returned. The circle is complete. The gate will open." The congregation began to sway, chanting louder. The girl screamed behind her gag. Boone moved, rifle up. "On my mark." Eliza nodded, her own rifle raised. 3, 2. Gunfire exploded. Boone dropped the first two robed figures before they even turned. Eliza hit another. Screams erupted, panic blooming like fire. Malachi ducked behind the altar, dragging the girl with him. Boone stormed forward, reloading on the run. Eliza stayed at his flank, sharp and calm, putting bullets into targets like she was born to it. By the time the last figure fell, the chamber reeked of smoke and blood. Boone kicked aside a body and stormed toward the altar. Malachi rose, pistol in hand, the girl's neck pressed tight to his arm. "Eliza," he bellowed. "Come forward." Boone froze. Eliza stepped into the torchlight, rifle down. "Let her go," she said. "You were chosen," Malachi hissed. "Your blood opens the way. You were supposed to die." "I did," she said softly. "But not the way you wanted." His eyes flicked to Boone. "Brother, you were always weak." Boone stepped forward, slow, calm. "Let the girl go, Malachi." "Or what? You'll kill your own blood." "If it saves hers, yes." Malachi snarled and tightened his grip. Then Eliza moved. Fast. She dove sideways, rolling across the ground as Boone fired. The shot hit Malachi in the shoulder, spinning him. He dropped the girl, who scrambled away. Eliza caught her, pulled her behind the altar. Boone approached his brother slowly, rifle still aimed. Malachi clutched his arm, bleeding heavily, eyes wild. "You think this ends anything?" he rasped. "There are more. They've seen the light." Boone looked down at him with something close to pity. "I saw the light too. It was my wife's funeral pyre. You lit it." Malachi's smirk faltered. "You were always preaching fire," Boone said, leveling the rifle. Then he pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the chamber, silencing what remained of the chants. It was over. Boone turned to Eliza. She was holding the girl close, whispering to her, soothing her like someone who'd done it before. Boone crouched beside them. "She okay?" Eliza nodded. "Just scared. Like I was." He put a hand on her shoulder. "You did good." They climbed out of the mine as dawn crept across the sky. Behind them, the Devil's Lung was nothing more than a dark scar in the earth. Boone took one last look, then lit the fuse from his coat. They watched from the ridge as the charges detonated, the ground shaking beneath their feet. Dust and rock erupted skyward, sealing the mouth of hell shut for good. Eliza didn't speak as they rode away, but Boone could see something had shifted in her. Not peace, not yet, but a beginning. A clearing of ash. The girl, her name was Annie, slept between them, exhausted. Boone adjusted the reins. "You still got family?" Eliza nodded faintly. "A cousin in Carson City. We'll take her there." "What about you?" Boone looked at the rising sun, the light catching on the mountains. "I think I'll go home. Fix the roof. Maybe plant something for once." Eliza gave him a tired smile. "You think things you'll stay quiet?" "No," he said. "But I think we earned a little quiet before the next storm." They rode on, the wind behind them and the scars of the past buried beneath stone. But not forgotten. Boone hadn't meant to ride back into Dustmere, but fate, like the wind in the canyons, had a habit of pushing you down trails you thought you'd long buried. A month had passed since the Devil's Lung collapsed behind him. A month of silence, solitude, and slow repairs on the old ranch. He'd patched fences, mended the barn roof, watched the land start to heal. But peace, it turned out, wasn't something a man like him could hold on to for long. Eliza's letter had arrived 2 days prior, delivered by a passing stagecoach, addressed in a neat but hurried hand. "They're back." Or someone like them. Girl in Carson vanished. Same scars. Same symbols. Thought you should know. So now Boone rode again. Rifle across his saddle, pistol at his hip, hat pulled low. Dustmere hadn't changed much. Same crooked saloon sign, same tired horses tethered outside the sheriff's office, same dust clawing at the boots. But something was off. Tighter. The town moved like it was holding its breath. The sheriff met him with a suspicious glare. "Calder Boone. I heard you were dead." Boone dismounted slow. "Almost was. A few times." "Funny, seems like trouble keeps crawling out of the grave with you." Boone stepped forward, handed him the letter. "Read it." Then tell me if trouble's following me, or already here. The sheriff scanned it, jaw tightening. We got a girl gone, yes. 4 nights ago. Right from her bed. Parents didn't hear a sound. Found a red mark on her door. Couldn't scrub it off. Where? North End. By the river. Same place you grew up. Boone's eyes darkened. Then I reckon I'll start there. He found Eliza waiting by the river bend, rifle slung over her back, hands on her hips. Her hair was shorter now, jaw firmer. The girl, Annie, wasn't with her. Boone didn't ask. He could see the wear on Eliza's face, like she hadn't slept in days. I knew you'd come, she said. Boone dismounted. You were right. It's not over. No, it never was. This isn't just Malachi's cult. It's bigger. Older. He was just one root. Then we burned the rest. She smiled faintly. I like your optimism. They moved quickly. The child's house sat nestled among cottonwoods, isolated and eerily quiet. The front porch still had a rocking chair, swaying gently in the breeze, though no one sat in it. Boone crouched near the threshold, studying the symbol. It was scrawled in something thick and black, curled into spirals with teeth, an invitation, not a warning. This wasn't paint, he said. It's blood. Burnt into the wood. Eliza nodded. I tracked prints into the hills. One rider. Heavy horse. Wagon marks too. You follow them? I waited. Figured you'd want the honor. He gave her a tired smile. You figured right. They rode that evening, twilight dripping through the trees. The trail curved north, past the edge of known maps into old Paiute land. Boone had been there once as a boy on a cattle drive gone wrong. Back then the locals called it the place where stones whisper. He hadn't understood what they meant. Now he did. The trail turned rocky, the air growing thinner, harder to breathe. Shapes shifted in the shadows, eyes watching, always just beyond reach. Boone's horse grew restless. Eliza's hand hovered near her pistol the whole ride. By midnight they found it. A stone chapel. Half buried in earth, hidden among twisted pines. It leaned to one side as if ashamed of its own existence. Windows were blackened, roof broken. But candlelight flickered inside. They tied the horses and crept forward, rifles drawn. Inside the pews were shattered. The altar was covered in symbols, carved deep in bleeding dark wax. At the center stood a woman, tall, veiled, dressed in ash-gray robes. Her voice wove through the silence like smoke. Another child. Another gate. The vessel must open. The girl lay on the altar, bound and gagged. Alive. Boone raised his rifle. Step away. The woman didn't turn. You cannot stop it. He opened the path. His blood echoes in the soil. Eliza moved to flank, boots silent on the stone. You talk like you knew Malachi. I did. He was but one of many hands. The soil is thirsty. It remembers. Boone fired. The bullet hit the stone behind her. She vanished. Eliza. Too late. Shadows spilled from the walls like ink, forming shapes, twisted mockeries of men, their faces veiled, their limbs bent wrong. They came fast. Boone dropped 2 with his revolver. Eliza caught another with her rifle but, smashing it to the ground. They moved to the altar, Boone cutting the girl loose while Eliza covered him. Can you walk? He asked the child. She nodded, mute with fear. Good. Stay behind me. They retreated toward the door, but it slammed shut, thick roots curling across it like fingers. Trap. Up there, Eliza shouted, pointing to a broken window high above. Boone lifted the girl. Climb. Go. The child hesitated, then scrambled up, small fingers gripping stone. Eliza gave her a boost, then turned back to the shadow figures now crawling across the ceiling. We need fire, Boone growled. Only way to end it. Eliza reached into her coat and tossed him a satchel. Kerosene. I wasn't taking chances. Boone poured it over the altar, the walls, the floor. Cover me. She did. Gunfire rang out, echoing loud as thunder in the stone chamber. The shadows screamed, no voice, just pain and fury. Boone lit a match. Let hell swallow itself, he muttered, then threw it. Flames roared, eating the symbols, chasing the dark back into the corners. The stone cracked. The ceiling groaned. The chapel began to fall in on itself. Boone grabbed Eliza's arm. Time to go. They ran, ducking falling beams, smoke clawing at their throats. At the window the girl was waiting, hands stretched down. Boone climbed first, then reached for Eliza. A beam collapsed behind her. Eliza. I'm fine, she coughed, pushing herself forward. Go. They tumbled out just as the roof gave way entirely, the chapel sinking into flame and ash. The land around it trembled, then stilled. Silence. Dawn broke over the ridge as they sat beneath a pine, catching breath, the girl asleep between them. Boone looked at Eliza. "You all right?" She nodded. "Burn my coat. That was my favorite one." Boone chuckled. "I'll buy you a new one." She smiled weakly. "You broke your promise, Boone. You said we'd have quiet before the next storm." "I lied," he said. "You seem to attract storms." They sat in silence for a while, watching the smoke fade into the morning light. "I don't think this was the last of it," Eliza said finally. Boone sighed. "No, probably not. But I'm not scared anymore," she added. "Not of them. Not of the past." Boone glanced at her, saw the fire still in her eyes. "You shouldn't be. You beat them. Twice." "No," she said. "We beat them. You and me." He nodded. "We make a good pair. Better than most." The girl stirred, groggy but safe. Boone wrapped his coat around her. "We'll take her back," he said. "Get her home." Eliza stood, brushing dust from her knees. "And after that?" Boone looked toward the horizon, where the sun burned gold over the hills. He thought of his wife's grave, of the life he almost had, and the life he'd chosen instead. "After that," he said, "we keep riding." Eliza raised an eyebrow. "Into more trouble?" "Into whatever comes next." They mounted up, riding slow through the trees. The land behind them still smoked, but ahead the world stretched wide and open. They weren't done fighting. But they weren't alone anymore. And sometimes that was enough.